He pulled up his gun. I thought, this is really the end of my life. And in my heart, I was wondering, why didn't he have mercy? Why didn't he have the love of the people who I was with? And what was blocking his sight? What was blocking his heart from him being able to see me in the same way? And so he was so close, I could see him pull the trigger. The bullet grazed the top of my head, blew me off my feet. I slammed down to the ground, and my consciousness immediately went up. So I was dying of blood loss. My consciousness was watching my life force be outside of my body in these waves. And then I immediately came back down into my heart, and it was like a collapsing room. And I thought, I want out of here. My consciousness, my awareness, my being went out the back of my heart in a tunnel that was so fast, but so peaceful, so held. And my awareness arrived in an entirely new place.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast. My name is Garrett and I am delighted to be back again for another incredible interview with a very special guest, Robin Lansing. Robin is a transformational speaker, visual artist, medicine singer, and medical health intuitive. She had two near-death experiences during the Rhodesian War in 1977, when she was 8 years old, when she was called back to life by the medicine song of a rural Zimbabwean woman. It opened her own medicine songs, and she has given singing medicine to over 1,600 people. Her specialties as a Cranio-Sacral therapist are trauma resolution, the neurobiology of connection, and restoring the natural rhythms in the body. She sees each person's gifts, strengths, and underlying causes of their physical, emotional, or spiritual distress. Robin helps people come home to their creativity, intuition, and embodiment. Robin, hi, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so good, and thank you for having me on. I'm really delighted to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be introducing you to the viewers and the listeners. You have an incredible story, and I'm really eager to get into it, Robin. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your life before your NDEs?
So, like so many people know, when there's that generational disruption in caring for your children, and of course, all mammals have that instinct to protect their young. But when something has happened generationally along the way, then there's parents who have lost that instinct and sometimes are reversed in terms of harming their own children. So that's the situation I was growing up in. And like I say, I know a lot of listeners can relate to varying degrees of that and different details about that. And so the reason I love to share my story is to really help people gain a bigger context about kind of why that happens, and that trauma in childhood isn't really personal, it's a cultural problem, it's a social problem, it's a generational problem. So that helps people shift from thinking there's something wrong with me that made this happen to what's happening in our human collective, that we need to restore our ability to care for each other and especially our young. So I was, of course, growing up in danger, and that makes you vulnerable to strangers outside of the family. And so one of those people in my neighborhood who wasn't safe, a visitor to my neighborhood, spotted me as a unprotected child, watched that I walked home from school, waited till the end of the school year, end of the day, came to my school and abducted me. And it's a strange thing to say that it's almost a good thing that I was already used to protecting my own survival, because then I knew how to use my intuition to shift my how I was behaving, shift my consciousness to figure out how am I going to survive this person's mental illness, this person's disturbance and confusion. So again, I always like to frame it in, I don't even actually would like to use the word abuse because that's so subjective in what that means. But just when we come back to looking at human confusion and health, nervous system health, then we can bring it back to biology. And that's a more interesting and less judgmental place from which to do our healing, from which to restore ourselves. So it was 1977. There's very little discussion about child abuse happening at that time. Child Protective Services wasn't even an entity in the United States at 1977. So it was quite easy. People ask, how did he get you out of the country? So he took me to Rhodesia at the height of the war, which is now Zimbabwe. And at that time, there was no conversation happening on a big scale about human trafficking. So it was quite easy for him to get me out of the country. He drugged me, so I don't know the details of that. When I became conscious again, I was, again, immediately figuring out how am I going to survive the next couple of minutes. He ended up assaulting me, broke my ribs on this side, and I thought that was going to be my death experience because I was quite injured, and I thought, this is the end of me. I really wanted to go because I hadn't really received a lot of kindness in this lifetime besides teachers at school. And what happened was the angel came down. And again, I'm a very kind of a hardened 8-year-old girl. And I'm asking her like, oh, you know what, this is so good. I'm going to get to be relieved of this experience of being human. And she said, it's not your time to go. And I got really angry and said, I want a new angel. Like, aren't you seeing what's happening? I have no relief. I have no protection. I have no safety. But she just kind of said reassuring words. And I thought, can I get somebody else to talk to? Can I talk to your manager? So I didn't die at that time. I got...
Robin, were you out of the United States at this stage?
Yes.
You were actually
so
in
Rhodesia.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was, to the best of my memory, I was actually on the military training camp with him, and he was hiding me, assaulted me, but this got the attention of a person living next door, and so they called the military police. I was hospitalized. And the incredible thing is that 40 years later, I've gone back and retraced all my steps in Zimbabwe. And I actually found the hospital. I found the exact hospital bed that I was in. And it's really the magnitude of what it was like to be able to go back and find and have everything match my memory. And here's a very important point in neurobiology, because now I have a lot of training and expertise in how to heal the nervous system from trauma, is that when our survival is at stake, we hyper-record every detail, or we completely white it out and suppress it. But we're more likely to hyper-record when we think where there's still a chance to fight for our own survival. So I've written my book, and people say, how could you remember so much detail? And it's because I was hyper-recording. And I was shocked as I was writing the book, and I took 16 years to write it. And I kept having people ask me questions. I had all these editors and beta readers, and they would just ask for more details. And it would just come up in my consciousness because of their concern and care and compassionate question. So that's how my book has the level of detail that it does. So I was hospitalized. I didn't want to live. I did live, and he came and got me. Again, height of the war. This is Rhodesia. He's an intimidating, high-ranking military person. Nobody stopped him, even though he almost killed me. And I really don't know why he came back to get me. And other than that, I was possession, and he had kind of ownership. But he ended up giving me to another man because it was the end of his 5-day training based on my research. And he gave me to another man, and that man ended up losing me in the bush.
Hi, guys. I hope you are enjoying the show. I just have a quick favor to ask for those of you who are not already subscribed to the channel. If you could please subscribe, as it really helps to promote our show through the YouTube algorithm. So what that means is the more people who are subscribed, the bigger the guests we can have on the show. So hit that subscribe button and let's help grow this channel. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the show with Robin.
And understand that this is the height of the Rhodesian War. And the Rhodesian War was about land and control and kind of the white government, the oppressive white government, and people trying to get land back. So the chances of a white child surviving alone during that war are extremely low. So what ended up happening is I got picked up by some of the more extreme soldiers, and I thought, now this is going to be my last moment on the earth, and thank goodness I'll be gone. But the interesting thing, and again, this is why I wrote my book, is because even in extreme circumstances of war, people still do kind acts. And so one of those soldiers protected me from the other soldiers, one of whom wanted just to shoot me. So that's part of what formed who I am, is that those people taking the risk to save my life is what formed who I am today. And so that's the name of my book, Loving Bravely, because of the people who they chose to take the risk to love me bravely. So that soldier ended up dropping me off at a village he thought would be sympathetic to a white child. And they took me in. And they didn't have to, but here I was, a white child alone. And they probably assumed that my white parents were from there and had been killed. And they had, of course, no idea that I was an abducted child from America. And the key is that they took me in. There's a tradition in Africa of taking care of each other's children. And that children, there's not so much a kind of a one family idea as there is in a lot of Western culture, but there's a shared community.
Raised by the village.
Yeah, I am because we are. So the children were touching my hair, was more blonde then, they're touching my white skin, they're touching my clothes. And one of the women sang to me. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that for you today. And my singing is different than hers, but it still is the same nurturing that she gave to me. And what I'm doing when I'm singing is I'm saying, I see you, you're real, you matter. Because so many people have attachment trauma, didn't have somebody to mentor them, to say, hey, how are you doing today? You look sad, which is called mirroring in neurobiology. And with this singing, she was saying, you belong, that you're equal in all the life that I see, every tree, every person, the river, that your life force is valued in among the nature, in with the ancestors. And so again, so many people are aching for that restoration of being seen. And so what she did for me in that moment was shift me from a child who was barely alive and didn't really want to be here to a child who just received mothering for the first time in my life. So I thought this was my new life, that there's no mirror, so I forgot that I was white. I was kind of blocked out my remembering of, my first 8 years in America with my family that lacked love and compassion. And they gave me a name. And I now know the name they gave me was Shy, and that the greeting for a girl is I. And so I put it together as Aisha. And they gave me a
Aisha.
naming ceremony and sang to me. And at night, they would sleep next to me. So I had the first really deep experience of belonging, being part of, and accepted as I am. And so they put clay on my bruised ribs, and the women sang to me by a river. And they were taking the hatred that came with the assault. So this is where I learned what I am to do in this lifetime. That those women singing to me instilled that I am to sing to others, just as they did for me. And so the critical turn in the story is, of course, I wandered a bit back to that river where they had sung to me and where I'd experienced healing of their voices. And I didn't know that a battle was starting. And so a soldier was scouting the perimeter of that area where the battle was going to happen, and he spotted me. And I froze like a rabbit, but he already had seen me. And what happens a lot of times in trauma is that we freeze in order to be not seen or create kind of more agitation in the perpetrator of harm. So my whole body froze, because some people say, why didn't you run? And I said, because that's not the neurobiology response to danger. So again, I was frozen. He pulled up his gun. When the gun barrel became just a circle, I thought, this is really the end of my life. And in my heart, I was wondering, why didn't he have mercy? Why didn't he have the love of the people who I was with, and that they could see me as a valuable child? And what was blocking his sight? What was blocking his heart from him being able to see me in the same way? And so he was so close, I could see him pull the trigger. And so now I understand that the scope is off when you're that close. He was probably aiming here, but the bullet grazed the top of my head, blew me off my feet. I slammed down to the ground, and my consciousness immediately went up because, as some people might know, you do a tremendous amount of bleeding from the top of the head. So I was dying of blood loss. My consciousness was watching my life force be outside of my body in these waves. And then I immediately came back down into my heart, and it was like a collapsing room. And I thought, I want out of here. My consciousness, my awareness, my being went out the back of my heart in a tunnel that was so fast, but so peaceful, so held. And my awareness arrived in a new, entirely place. And this place was calm. There was no violence. There was no pressure. There was no longer a need to defend or protect my life. So it was just relief. And then someone touched my face and touched the other side of my face. And I remembered I had a face. And she kind of brought me up. I could sense she was feminine. And she was so familiar, so loving, kind of like my big sister who had protected me maybe for lifetimes. And so as the more she touched me, made contact with me, the more I'd become aware of her and the other woman behind her. And their skin was black. They had yellow dresses. And they were showing me I could go home to this great golden glowing sphere, and that I would be completely restored, and that the golden glowing sphere, and this is my art behind me, printed on a towel, and so this is something of the golden glowing sphere. And this represents my mama in Africa, that my world rested on her back. And so they showed me this option, But I was still struggling because I wanted to get back to this lifetime because I finally had loving family. I finally had loving mamas, and I was receiving kind of what a child needs. And so that struggle pulled me away from them and then into another realm. And we talked about this. Some of my heritage is Irish. And so I dropped into this realm that was a stone stairwell, and it was kind of cold and overcast. And I associated it with kind of a day in Ireland. And these stone steps were so old and worn down in the center, and so many feet had walked down that stone steps. And it was kind of one stone steps down this way towards me. I was on a landing, and then a stone steps down. And I thought, wait, where am I? It was so much nicer before. It was all sunny and warm, and now I'm in this cold place, and there's moss between the steps, and just this feeling of kind of dank, but it was still quiet and peaceful. And I was struggling to get up because I had a sense of a body now. And then there was a man who appeared right before me, and I thought, where did he come from? I thought I was alone. And he looked frail and kind of rickety, and he was offering his arm for me to use his arm to get up. And I thought, oh, he's so old, I would just pull him over. And I was a very fiercely, overly independent child, and I wanted to do it myself. But I couldn't, and I needed to be humble to receive his help. So I used his arm to get up, and then I found he was incredibly sturdy. And even though he looked so old, he was this presence of steadiness and strength. And so he gestured that we were going to go down these stone stairs, and I didn't know what else to do, so I followed with him. And we were going into a stone archway into this kind of darker, kind of lower level. And I looked on my shoulder, and something was dripping on my shoulder. I thought it was rain, and then I realized it was my own blood from my head. And I was panicked, and I showed it to him, and he nodded. And we didn't need to use words. We were directly speaking to one another. And he got across to me, I see you what's happening, and it's even more important that we go into this cave. So again, I was hesitant to go into this dark cave where my eyes couldn't adjust, I couldn't see. But he guided me. He was there with me at every step. And what's important about that cave is that I call it the Purification cave, and that I was faced with all the adults who had assaulted, been violent to me, been cruel to me, and their faces were coming up to me. And I was hearing my own repressed emotion echoing around that cave, just like my calls for help, crying out in that cave. And again, I just want to get across that it's a normal response that children will suppress calling out for help when there is no help available. We will override the biological instinct to call out for help. So that's what was transforming while I was in the dark cave with my guide. And at a certain point, I looked at him and kind of questioned, what's wrong with me that all these adults were violent towards me? And suddenly I could see myself kind of from his eyes. My consciousness perspective shifted to his eyes. And I saw that there was nothing wrong with me, that I was born an aspect of divine source, and that it was the confusion, the misalignment, the unhealed trauma of the adults that was the reason for the abuse, that no part of me was wrong, and that I was just an aspect of divine source that sung me into being, into innocence, into vulnerability, into strength, and into resilience. And so that's also what I love to get across and I learned in my death experience, is that vulnerability and strength go right together, and that we need both for our deepest wholeness. So once I realized that there was nothing wrong with me, then I was ready to graduate from this dark cave. And I came out and onto this other level, and the sky was like living relatives, full of stars. And I realized this guide, who looked like an old man, he had come from this place in the universe, that he was some kind of being in the universe, and that he chose to come help me through my dark cave so I wouldn't get lost in avoidance. I wouldn't get lost in trying to run away from that which is painful. And that with his help, I could turn and face that which was just distressing and, maybe even overwhelming to go through alone. And that trauma happens when we have to bear it alone, because children and adults can go through all kinds of things when we have witness and support. So he was that for me, allowing healing. So we came out of that dark cave, we were on that platform, and now my defended 8-year-old stance was now basically in love with his open-heartedness. And it was irrevocable that I could now be as open-hearted as he. And so I put my hands in his, and I, with my kind of telepathic ability, said, "Where are we going next?" And he looked over the cliff edge and he said, "We're going to leap off the cliff." And I said, okay, because again, my faith in him was absolute. So we leapt off the cliff. And what's so interesting is the stars were above, but they were also within and all around. And we were like birds resting on the wind. And again, I have done art of all my death experience, and the book has 25 images of my art and photos of my return trips to Zimbabwe. And that I did all this art because I wanted to be able to get across the medicine, the healing of my death experiences. And so I dropped down into a field. I had a premonition, a seeing of what was going to happen when I did return. And that when I went back to the village, something was going to happen where people were going to be down on the ground and not able to call back to me. And I believe that the grief I felt at seeing that scene during my death experience before I returned back to life allowed me to survive what was going to happen when I did come back. And that my guides, the beings, the realm, the medicine that's available in that realm fortified me to be able to survive. And so I met another being. He again purified, showed me our interconnection to all living beings. And I'm going to keep that one shorter because people can read about it in the book or the audiobook. And he brought me back to hover above and see my body as kind of my final closing before I was going to reunite with what I call the Great Heart. And so when I was hovering above and seeing my body, and it was so sad, my face was expressionless. My mama had come and found me, pulled me onto her lap. She was stopping the blood flow, and she was wailing into the sky. And I wanted to tell her, I'm fine. I'm not in pain. I'm perfectly guided, and I'm going to get to go home. And so I went with my guide. I call my royal shepherd. We rose up, and I could hear her wailing change to singing. And I was going through the veils. More beings were literally moving through me, purifying me of any last confusion that thought that I wasn't valuable. Because they had to prepare me for the magnitude of the love from the Great Heart, and that I could see I was a drop, ready to reunite in the source that sang me into being. And so again, I'm getting closer and closer. I'm ready to reunite. My individual identity no longer matters to me that much. But I hear my mama, and she changes her singing to call on the ancestors in the land in Zimbabwe, and call her relatives to call me back to life. So again, here's my choice to reunite with this great source, or listen to this singing. And again, mine's different than theirs, but I'm going to give some of that to see, and just getting curious for listeners if they feel any part of themselves called home, as was done for me. Showahi, I am no way, I am home. am he, oh, whoa, way, no, hey, yo. And their song awakened my memory that I am part of the choir of medicine singers, those who sing at birth, those who sing at people's death, those who sing in ceremony and call people home to themselves again when they've had a disturbance that's knocked them off center. And so I returned back to sing to others, and as I was returning, I met another being in the tunnel that told me, we have all these art images for you to draw, and we're going to give you one after the other, and you are to draw them to remind yourself and others of our belonging in the web of life, and that each person, again, is a gem in this huge living matrix, and that each person is valuable, kind of no matter what we've had to do to survive. So I came back, I was returned back to my body, and it was the groundedness of my mama holding my body and the other people who came from the village. There was a man who was very good to me. His name was Atto. And so he picked me up, took me back to the village. And again, the blood is still drying. And they took me into a hut, and they were singing prayer. And they were getting the hatred that came with the bullet off my head, so I didn't go through life bitter, resentful, or try to get revenge. Because when we can clear those things out, then we're more available to allow divine purpose for goodness, for service, to show up in this lifetime. So as I saw in the premonition of my death experience, soldiers came back to the village about 2 days later, attacked the village, and when another mother and I was on her hip, and we were running to escape, and she was shot from behind, and this part has taken me so many years to heal, that I went down to the ground, which started the bleeding again since it had only been 2 days, and I wanted to pull her with me to safety, but she yelled at me to keep going, and I was 8, I was little, I couldn't pull her with me, and so I ran, and I didn't make it too far before I fell face forward in the sand, and I've been able to go back, retrace my steps, and find that exact location. And, I know it was downhill. I was running for the trees to hide behind the big fig trees next to the Limpopo River. And so I fell down and I had another death experience. And in this, I met a being, and again, I'm going to give the abbreviated version because it's all in my book and audiobook. And the key with this, here I am, I'm losing everybody I loved. And when I looked back, everybody was down. Atto was down. And I wanted to be able to go back and sing to him and bring him back to life just as my mama did for me. But running forward was the only way because it was so unsafe. And so this being that I now understand to be Shiva can create, can destroy. And he showed me kind of two land masses crushing together to make a mountain. And that this mountain was so beautiful, but that even the mountain would be destroyed grain by grain to make the beach. And what he was teaching me is that out of destruction makes available new ingredients for some creation that we cannot see in the moment of tragedy. And in the moment when we're on our knees, not sure how we're going to take our next breath, where everything that we thought was stable would be there is now in pieces, in ruin, then he's there to remind me of there's something that's going to come out of this. We can't see it in the moment, and we're not expected to know it in the moment. But that continuing with our recovery, continuing with healing together in community, someday, somehow, some good might come of it. And so again, that was my driving force to write the book, because I was, as far as I know today, from my going back and researching, I might be the only survivor of that massacre. And I
Oh,
survived
wow.
because I was face down and already looked dead. So writing the book was my honoring of their deaths, and that I wrote their love as a transmission. And especially in the audiobook, I
Mm.
literally just got myself back in that time period, back in that place, back in that energy, and transmitted their love that they gave me through my voice. And that's, the healing potency that I hear from people about the audiobook in particular. And that's what I get to do now, is I lead group transmissions. And people say, your mama came to me, Atto came to me, the land came to me and helped heal my organs, helped heal my heart, helped heal my history. So it's so humbling to get to be the conduit of their love in the world that so needs love, nurturing, belonging, community. So I'll just say, once I got done the book, I was lost, because this, has been my
Mhm.
16-year complete devotion. And I just would lay and meditate and ask Shiva, like, what's my next divine assignment? Because I'm lost. I actually went through what's called post-achievement depression. Like, why am I still here? And so I just like to validate that for people, that it's not like, yes, I had a celebration party and I was super depressed and I'm feeling better now. And my next divine assignment that he gave me is, he said, you're still the storyteller. And I do actually already have my next book about healing trauma about 80% done. But he said, you are to tell the story with other people who are dying, and especially children. And that I'm to sing to children who have a terminal diagnosis and write their life review in art with them. And if they have a transformation and they heal, then we write the ending of the book together. If they cross over, I'm a medium and I can see people's crossing. So with their permission, the end of the story will be the art of their crossing. So that's a pretty big divine assignment.
Wow,
And I
Robin,
look,
that's really beautiful. I mean, just to quickly jump in, such a tragic story, but told in such a beautiful way that, I mean, I I felt like I was there with you. I was actually seeing scene after scene. The picture was in my mind, totally beautiful. Like, I mean, incredible storyteller, beautiful, really beautiful. And I guess, okay, so one of the questions that comes to my mind, like why such tragedy to such a young girl at 8 years of age? And I mean, I can only guess that it is to, direct your life in the direction that you're going now, becoming a teacher, helping to heal, being a medium, the books. Can we talk a little bit about the work, or how your life veered after that, and the role that you've moved into now as the
yeah,
healer and the teacher? Yeah.
yeah. And so first I'll just people often ask, well, how did you get back to the US? So
Okay. Yeah.
I was found by another woman after the massacre. She ended up giving me over to, and I had really healing experiences with her and her granddaughter, Mayamu. And so they ended up giving me to the nearest white farming family in South Africa. They ended up taking me to the hospital. The hospital basically interrogated me to find out where I was from, because I couldn't understand Afrikaans, the white Dutch settlers' language.
And Robin, did you know, like, you knew you were American? You had that like awareness that you
You
had been
know, children
abducted?
can, yeah, children can really divide up consciousness. and really repress things. So it was kind of through their basically asking me over and over again and interrogating me that I was able to come up with that suppressed, aspect of my life. But I did tell them, who my parents were. They contacted them. I have gone back and looked for records, but again, this is apartheid. And so suddenly I'm in a whites-only situation where they're saying horrible things about Black people, which is heartbreaking and confusing to me as a child. And so an agent, we're not able to find out kind of what agent, he had an English accent, accompanied me back on a flight back to the US. And again, I've gone back to that hospital and all the records before apartheid had been destroyed. So we're not able to find that. Any records in Rhodesia, there aren't really any, but they were also destroyed when Mugabe came into power. So when people ask, do you have any documentation? I say, no, and most people who live through war don't. And the majority of crimes and people who have lived through violence don't have documentation. It's a very small percentage of violence survivors who actually have witness documentation. So I always like to say, if our goal is to heal violence among humans, let's not emphasize that it had to have an authority witnessing the violence in order to consider it serious, in order to consider it valid and worthy of doing the healing work, which requires witness and recognition. So I came back to the U.S. My family never wanted me to talk about what happened, which again increases repressing it. They had no capacity to hear me, to even get curious, like, why did I still have broken ribs? Why did I have this wound on the top of my head? They pretended in such an extreme way that it never happened. So both my parents are deceased. My siblings we've never talked about it. They don't want to hear about it. So that's why it's so important that we trauma survivors support each other, which is actually a huge percentage of the population, and that when we can witness and validate, and it's okay if people just have parts and pieces of memory or they have confusion, because that's the nature of how we store trauma in the brain. And that's why it took me 16 years to write this book. So I've been at about 35. I was ready, far enough in my own healing that I was ready to do training to help other people's healing. So I became a Cranio-Sacral Therapist, which again is specializing in helping people's nervous system. And for me, it's the perfect combination of anatomy, biology, nervous system, and energy, and divine source. So I love science and I love intuition. So I love both, and that intersection place is really exciting for me. So I've done that for, 23 years, done over like 17,000 sessions. At a certain point, with my intuition being so open from my near-death experiences, I went to online during COVID, so I can read people from Australia, from Europe, from all over, and I can actually still do craniosacral with people energetically worldwide, which is so fun for me.
Okay, wow.
And I can read people's organ health and brain health, nervous system. I often get visions of things in people's past, whether it's generational, whether it's birth, and when people were just developing in childhood, and see what might be sitting upon people's life force. Or the other big thing is people will dissociate a part of themselves off, their core life force, if that was what was needed to survive the circumstances. So I love calling aspects of people's vitality back to their physical body, because there's a lot of spiritual things that emphasize up and out, which for trauma survivors can be another form of dissociation and can be kind of a spiritual bypassing. So getting embodied was my big project in healing. Getting to where I could feel my root chakra and feel my muscles and my bones and my movement. And now my healing is really about dance. And I do partner dance trainings, and where it's about what does my body feel in relation to another human being. And to me, that's kind of the final frontier of my healing trauma process, because it's fun and it's enlivening and it's miraculously healing to move our bodies and be in relation with other people who are good, in a good-hearted way, doing the same. So yeah, I have my practice where I do individual sessions and group sessions, which are super fun. One of my teachers said sessions help people heal our need for community of other people who are devoted to doing their trauma resolution work. And I also do classes and the transmissions of the love I received during my death experience and during the love I received from humans too. So it's, and then I do my art. I just made a whole series on towels because it's a really easy, affordable way to get my art.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, and like I said, I did the book has a lot of the, so they're in black and white in the book, but this is the image that's behind me.
That's a wonderful, yeah.
And it was so much fun to, again, 16 years I worked on doing the art and the writing. And my key is there's a lot of books that get released too early in people's process, and they're just kind of dumping their unresolved trauma. And so I wanted to give my healing. So every time I advanced in my own healing, I went back and edited the book so that that's what's leaping off the page. And I made the trauma as free of graphic as I could, and and I made it as short as possible. And I made the loving scenes as long and as slow as possible. And again, in the audiobook, there's the singing medicine, and there's recordings of the ceremony when I went back. And so that might be an interesting thing to share. When I went back the second time, again, 40 years after the war, and that was 2019, and they invited me to be part of a ceremony, which was quite unusual. Even the white people who lived there had never been invited to be part of it. So that was a real privilege for all of us to get to be part of that. And then they invited me right into the center, which I didn't expect. And so, again, multiple near-death experiencer, I easily go into vision. And so from the drumming, from the singing, the idea of this was an ancestor ceremony for the ancestors to give each of us visions so that we could be well guided in our divine assignment. And so I was right near the drums. There was a woman who was drumming, and my consciousness went through the drum. And I was down on the ground, and the ancestors came, and they showed me an image, and it was kind of the side of humanity, like our delicate skin, and there was a big thorn in the side of humanity. And the ancestors said, "Take the thorn out of the side of humanity." And I said, "I don't know how." And they said, "Stop disowning your power." Very direct. Stop playing small. Stop playing that you don't know. They said, "Put your hand out." So in the vision, and also with my physical body, I put my hand out. I touched the thorn, and they helped me draw it back. And so I took the thorn out of the side of humanity. And I looked at it and I said, "What's this made of?" And they said, "Us versus them thinking. I'm superior, you're inferior. You're less than, I'm more than." Whatever kind of ways that we divide our humanity with race, with economy, with nationality, wherever there's superiority, inferiority, they said, your job is to help increase equality in humanity. And I said, that's a really big job. And then they said, we didn't tell you you're going to do it by yourself, that you're going to join with others who also value equality, and here's what it comes down to. Giving experiences of belonging is the foundation of equality. When we can welcome others in, when we can give people a place at the table, when their voice that might be pushed off to the side from oppression, when we can make a space for them to have a voice, that is the antidote to superiority and inferiority. That is what builds equality. And that's such an important point. I want to sing to that. So really singing to the equality, the ways we can value ourselves, so we even have the capacity to make that space at the table for somebody else. each of us be able to transform self-criticism, self-beratement, to calm that voice and say, what do you really need? And come back to our needs of belonging, of self-connection, connection to nature, connection to the land, so that we can come into self-compassion instead of self-beratement. Because when we're in self-compassion, our capacity to give compassion to others is greatly increased.
Wow. Robin, that's incredible. I've really enjoyed listening. And I totally, people just want to be seen. It's one of the things I work with people from all around the world as well, and I do retreats. And a lot of people that I meet on my retreats, it's like they just want to be welcomed. They want to be recognized. They want to be seen. They want to feel part of something. So, I mean, what the work you're doing sounds incredible. So, how do you put that across? Like, how do you work that in with your clients, recognizing them and seeing them? Yeah.
And so in the individual sessions, which are so fun, I'll grab some. I let people talk, and then I'm doing a drawing. And so in the drawing, again, I'm mirroring what I'm getting intuitively. So these are, I have like stacks of hundreds and hundreds of these. So I do these. So I do these drawings, and it gives both of us kind of intuitive information. And because I've done a couple thousand of these, then it's easy for me to interpret, like, okay, here we have masculine, feminine balance. Here we have the portal to bring a lost aspect of somebody home. And then I do rounds of singing to people. And through the singing, again, I'm saying, I see you, you're real, you matter. And people will, of course, not everybody's receptive to it because there's so many methods of healing. But for those who the singing really resonates in their body, they get visionary experiences, and they have these visionary experiences of their own healing. So I love stepping back, offering the singing, offering the drawing, offering the intuition. But the key, as you know, is that the transformation has to happen inside them. And then I always love empowering people's healing, because of course we don't want to get in the role of like being the healer, because that gets all kinds of boundary confusions and power differential and crazy wacky things that we don't want to get into. And so, and then the healing that happens in the group, because when I do the singing medicine for a group and I sing to each person, you know, something happens within that group, as you know, that magic of the collective consciousness. And again, I've been doing more, now that I'm done my book, I've been doing more of these transmission meditations in person. And people will have, like, one person sees the jaguar and has a major experience with him. The other person, it just walks through their vision, because it's in that collective of that group healing. You know, another person is seeing a dolphin come up to them. The other person, the dolphin's off in the distance for them. But we end up sharing collective visions.
So it's a journeying of some sort. Almost, it almost sounds like a plant medicine without the medicine.
Yes. Yes, very much. And that's the beauty of a near-death experience. And my having really embodied it is that when I do that heart meditation, when I'm dropping into the craniosacral rhythm, the fluid rhythm in the body, like seagrass going back and forth, that other people, that entrainment piece is so powerful. You know, and sometimes it brings up the distress to be integrated, and that's healthy. And sometimes it brings up, you know, these bliss, extraordinary, visionary experiences and shamanic journeys. So again, for the people that are receptive to that path of healing, it's so exciting and fun, and the transformation.
Yeah, it's definitely in your voice, Robin. I mean, even listening to you talking about your story earlier, you were really drawing me in. You know, I could see you in some of the scenes running, and, you know, the family members been around you. So it's definitely in your voice, the transmission, which is fabulous. And I'm sure the listeners and the viewers will feel that also. Is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Just the ways that we can support each other to do our gifts, and that I love. I have one client I worked with who came to one of my in-person retreats, and she had a stunning, amazing, powerful voice, but she was so blocked and shy about it that she wasn't kind of really offering it to the world. And so that was the
Wow.
exciting thing at the retreat. She got the confidence. So every
Mm.
way that we can help each other level up to say yes to, I'm going to step out. I'm going to not hide in my little rabbit hole. I'm going to take the risk to be seen. And, sometimes there's criticism, but so far there's just, like publishing my book, so far there's just been support and praise and appreciation. So it was a good risk to
Yeah,
take. So
that's
all
really
those ways,
beautiful.
and your workshops and what you're doing in the world, supporting people to shine their light and have the
Yeah.
true confidence to be able to take the risk and be able to handle, people who aren't shining their light sometimes get confused and want to attack people who are.
Yeah.
And just the more people we can help bring over to nervous system health and permission to be as big as we are is the key.
Robin, just one question. Nervous system health. Do you want to just quickly tell me a little bit more about that?
So, post-traumatic stress is, reliving constantly the traumatic feelings, even if they're not conscious. And we have high startle, we have trouble sleeping, we project a lot more danger when it's not actually present. So being able to do that nervous system healing is getting free of having to relive over and over again, even if it's in the background of your mind. And getting home to body sensation is the antidote to post-traumatic stress. And I believe self-criticism and self-beratement keeps post-traumatic stress going. So again, I got a lovely training from Stanford in compassion. And self-compassion is an expression of nervous system health. When we can be like, oh, it's difficult to be ill. It's difficult to be exhausted. And really ask for what our needs are, inventory our capacity, and say, what's my capacity today? Oh, only 20%. Okay, so then don't expect so much from myself. So
Okay.
eating a clean diet, feeding your adrenal health, reducing sugar, reducing stimulants, increasing exercise, increasing whole foods, vegetables, is an essential ingredient in nervous system health. You wouldn't expect to put crappy gas in your car and have it run well. So why do we think that we can put crappy food in our body and have it run well? We've got to take
Yeah.
responsibility step by step to reduce sugar, reduce inflammatory foods, and increase whole foods.
Beautiful, beautiful, Robin. Thank you so much for sharing. Robin, I just ask where people can get in contact with you. You've got a website, your social media links. I'm going to put links to them down below, but do you want to just speak them out there?
Yeah. So I have a website. Lots of people have helped me with. So I think it's quite beautiful, and it's got my music album I made last spring, Roots Drinking Rain. It's got the contact to the book, Loving Bravely, a memoir, and it's got my art. It's got places you can sign up for the individual, the groups, the classes, and I also have free groups that I do about once or twice a month. And you can also donate to the Marimani School in Zimbabwe if people are moved to do that, to help them get running water in their school so the kids can wash their hands. So it's Robyn, it's my name, robynlandsong.com.
Wow. Okay, wonderful. So I'll put links to all Robin's her website and her social
Yep.
media links as well. You've got like an Instagram and a Facebook and stuff like that, Robin, as well. I'll
Yeah, and
put
I
them
have
down
about
below.
36 videos on my YouTube channel, and so it's like I'm sharing a lot of
Yeah.
the singing medicine, instruction about how to heal your nervous system.
And your book is on Amazon as well. If it's
Yep.
Audible, it's yeah. Okay, brilliant. I'll put all them down below.
Mm-hmm.
Robin, you've been an incredible guest. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you so
Yes, it's
much.
been a
Okay.
delight. And just again, I'm looking forward to coming to Ireland in the spring, and I'm so enjoying hearing your accent. It just, again, my heritage is like, oh,
Thank
my
you.
whole body feels it.
Thank you so much, Robin. You've been amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks to the viewers and the listeners. Take care. Bye bye.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Garrett is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at _mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.